The rise of Rome is one of the most fascinating stories in human history, beginning with myth and legend, and gradually transforming into a reality that would shape the destiny of the ancient world. According to Roman tradition, the city was founded in 753 BC by the twin brothers Romulus and Remus, who were said to be the sons of the war god Mars and raised by a she-wolf. This myth was not just a story for entertainment, but a reflection of how Romans viewed themselves born of struggle, strength, and divine destiny. Romulus, after a quarrel with his brother, became the first king of Rome and gave the city his name. From this legendary start, Rome began its journey from a small village of huts along the Tiber River to a growing community that would eventually expand across the Mediterranean world. In its earliest days, Rome was surrounded by powerful neighbors, including the Etruscans to the north and the Latins and Sabines nearby. The Romans absorbed many influences from these groups, particularly the Etruscans, who contributed to early Roman architecture, religious rituals, and the symbols of authority that later defined Roman rule. Rome's kings established the foundations of the city, constructing temples, creating political institutions, and laying out the forum, which would later become the heart of Roman public life. This period of monarchy set the stage for Rome's unique political evolution, as by 509 BC, the Romans overthrew their last king, Tarquin the Proud, and established a republic. This transition from monarchy to republic marked a critical turning point, as it reflected Rome's deep mistrust of absolute power and its preference for shared governance. The early Roman Republic was not democratic in the modern sense, but it did establish principles that would last for centuries. Power was distributed among consuls, who were elected leaders, the Senate, which represented Rome's aristocracy, and assemblies that allowed for limited participation by ordinary citizens. This system was far from perfect, as the wealthy patricians dominated politics, but over time the plebeians, or common people, fought for and gained more rights, including the creation of the office of tribune to protect their interests. This constant struggle between patricians and plebeians shaped Rome's character, giving it resilience and flexibility in governance that helped it endure internal challenges. During this period, Rome was not yet an empire, but was steadily building the foundation for one. Its armies, made up of citizen soldiers, were highly disciplined and loyal to the state. Rome's location in central Italy gave it a strategic advantage, as it was positioned between northern and southern territories, and had access to both land routes and the sea. This allowed Rome to expand gradually, first securing its position in Latium, then moving against neighboring tribes and cities. Each victory brought new territory and new allies, but Rome's genius lay in how it treated the conquered, rather than simply enslaving defeated peoples. Rome often offered them a degree of citizenship or alliances, binding them into the Roman system. This policy created loyalty and helped Rome build a network of allies that strengthened its power. Religion also played a significant role in the rise of Rome. The Romans were deeply religious, believing that their success depended on the favor of the gods. They adopted deities and rituals from the Etruscans and Greeks, creating a complex system of worship that was closely tied to politics. Religious festivals, sacrifices, and augury were part of daily life, and leaders constantly sought to interpret the will of the gods. This spiritual framework gave Romans a sense of destiny and legitimacy in their actions, reinforcing their belief that Rome was chosen to rule. The early centuries of the Republic were marked by nearly constant warfare, but this struggle only made Rome stronger. Wars against the Etruscans, the Samnites, and other Italian tribes tested the resilience of the Roman state. The victory in these conflicts gradually gave Rome control over the Italian peninsula by the 3rd century BC. By this time, Rome had become the dominant power in Italy, commanding vast resources and manpower. Its armies were now battle-hardened, and its political institutions had evolved to manage an expanding state. The rise of Rome was not only about warfare and politics, but also about the development of a distinct Roman identity. Romans saw themselves as disciplined, practical, and devoted to the service of the state. Their values were embodied in the concept of mos maiorum, or the customs of the ancestors, which emphasized duty, honor, and respect for tradition. These values were passed down through families, reinforced by education, and celebrated in stories of heroic figures like Cincinnatus, the farmer who left his plow to serve as dictator in a time of crisis and then returned to his land after saving. The Republic. Such stories became moral lessons that inspired future generations of Romans to place the needs of the state above their own ambitions. By the late Republic, the foundations laid during these centuries of struggle and adaptation had transformed Rome from a modest settlement into a powerful state poised for even greater expansion. Its political institutions, military discipline, cultural values, and religious traditions had all combined to create a unique system that could withstand both internal and external pressures. The rise of Rome, from a village of farmers and warriors to the leading power of Italy, was not the result of chance, but the product of determination, adaptability, and a strong belief in destiny. The strength of the Roman Empire rested heavily upon its military power, which was unlike anything the ancient world had ever seen. From its earliest days as a republic, Rome relied on its legions to defend its territory, conquer new lands, and maintain control over the vast regions it brought under its influence. The Roman army was not merely a fighting force, it was a disciplined institution, a school of loyalty and duty, and an engine of expansion that made Rome the master of the Mediterranean world. To understand Rome's rise as a dominant empire, one must understand the central role played by its military. At the heart of Rome's military power was the legion, a unit of around 5,000 men. Divided into cohorts and centuries, each commanded by officers who enforced strict discipline. Unlike other ancient armies that relied heavily on mercenaries, the Roman legions were originally made up of Roman citizens. Men who were required to serve and trained from a young age in the art of warfare. This connection between citizenship and military service fostered loyalty to the state, as soldiers felt they were not only fighting for personal gain, but also defending their homeland and its traditions. Over time, as Rome expanded, non-citizens were also recruited, and military service became a pathway to citizenship, further strengthening the bond between conquered peoples and the empire. The training of a Roman soldier was relentless. Recruits were drilled in marching long distances while carrying heavy equipment, building camps, constructing fortifications, and learning to fight in tight formations. The Roman emphasis on endurance and discipline made their armies more reliable than their enemies, who often relied on numbers or short bursts of courage. Roman soldiers carried a distinctive set of weapons, the short sword known as the gladius, the javelin or pilum, and a large rectangular shield called the scutum. These weapons, combined with their protective armor, gave the legions both offensive and defensive capabilities, allowing them to adapt to different types of warfare. Tactics and organization were equally crucial. The Roman military system allowed for flexibility on the battlefield. While other armies fought in rigid lines, the Romans could break their legions into smaller units, enabling them to respond to sudden changes in combat. The testudo, or tortoise formation, in which soldiers aligned their shields to form a protective shell, is a famous example of Roman innovation. These tactics, combined with strict discipline, meant that even when outnumbered, Roman armies could achieve victory through order and strategy. The success of the Roman military was not limited to open battle. Rome excelled at siege warfare, building siege towers, battering rams, and catapults to overcome fortified cities. The ability to construct temporary bridges, roads, camps allowed Roman armies to move swiftly and maintain supply lines even in hostile territory. Every Roman camp was built with precision, complete with ditches, palisades, and organized layouts reflecting the efficiency and order that defined Roman military culture. As Rome expanded, its military campaigns stretched across vast distances. In the west, legions marched into Gaul under Julius Caesar, conquering tribes and bringing new wealth into Rome. In the east, they fought against the great powers of Greece and Asia Minor, absorbing their lands into the empire. In North Africa, they clashed with Carthage in the Punic Wars, where Rome's naval power was developed to counter one of the most formidable maritime empires of the ancient world. These wars were not just about territory, but also about securing dominance over trade routes, resources, and rival states. Each victory added to Rome's prestige and reinforced the image of invincibility associated with its armies. Infrastructure played a vital role in the expansion and maintenance of Rome's military power. It's a famous network of Roman roads stretching thousands of miles across Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa, allowed troops to move quickly from one region to another. These roads were not built solely for commerce or communication. They were primarily military highways, ensuring that reinforcements and supplies could reach distant provinces at remarkable speed. The phrase "all roads lead to Rome" reflected the centrality of these networks in uniting the empire. The Roman military was also a symbol of Roman authority. In newly conquered lands, the presence of legions established Roman law and order, discouraging rebellion. Forts and garrisons were constructed along frontiers, not only to defend against invasions, but also to demonstrate Roman strength to neighboring peoples. The construction of Hadrian's Wall in Britain is one example of how Rome combined military might with engineering skill to secure its borders. These defensive lines defined the limits of the empire and allowed Rome to focus its forces where they were most needed. Beyond conquest, the Roman army contributed to the cultural spread of Rome. Soldiers stationed in faraway provinces often settled there after their service, marrying locals and introducing Roman customs, language, and laws. This process of Romanization spread Roman identity throughout the empire, ensuring that conquered peoples became part of a larger Roman world. The army, therefore, was not only an instrument of war, but also a vehicle of cultural integration and expansion. The loyalty of the Roman legions was both a strength and, eventually, a source of tension. Generals such as Julius Caesar, who commanded immense loyalty from their troops, could use the army to challenge political authority in Rome itself. This connection between military power and political ambition would later play a decisive role in the transformation of the Republic into the Empire. Nevertheless, during the height of Rome's expansion, the discipline, training, and organization of the military were unmatched. The expansion of Rome was driven by the relentless march of its legions, who brought victory after victory and secured a legacy of dominance across 3 continents, from the forests of Germania to the deserts of Egypt. From the Atlantic shores of Hispania to the fertile lands of Mesopotamia, the Roman military presence was a reminder of the empire's strength and determination. Roman culture and society formed one of the strongest foundations of the empire's greatness, blending traditions from its earliest days with influences from the many peoples it conquered. Rome was not only a military power, but also a center of art, architecture, literature, law, the daily life that reflected both the practical mindset and the ambitious spirit of its people. The society of Rome was deeply hierarchical, structured around class, citizenship, and family, yet it was also remarkably adaptable, capable of absorbing customs from Greece, Egypt, the East, and the provinces it ruled. This balance between tradition and innovation shaped a culture that spread across 3 continents and continued to influence civilizations long after the empire's decline. At the heart of Roman culture was the family, known as the familia. The father, or pater familias, held authority over the household, including his wife, children, and even extended relatives and slaves. His role was both legal and moral, as he was expected to protect the family, maintain traditions, and honor the gods through rituals. Roman women, though lacking the same political rights as men, played significant roles in family and society. They managed households, influenced their husbands behind the scenes, and some from wealthy families held great sway in political and cultural life. Children were educated to respect tradition and discipline, with boys often trained for public life and military service. While girls were prepared for marriage and household duties, Roman society was divided into classes, with sharp distinctions between the patricians, who were the wealthy aristocrats, and the plebeians, the common citizens. Over time, these divisions softened, especially as successful plebeians gained wealth and entered political life. Slavery was also an integral part of Roman society, with slaves working in households, farms, mines, and even as teachers or physicians. While slaves had no rights, some could earn or be granted their freedom. Freedmen often became important contributors to Roman economy and culture. Citizenship, however, was the true marker of belonging. And over the centuries, Rome expanded citizenship to conquered peoples, making them part of the Roman world and spreading Roman identity far beyond Italy. Religion occupied a central place. In Roman life, the Romans believed their success came from the favor of the gods, and they performed rituals and sacrifices with great care. Every household had a shrine to family spirits, and public life was filled with festivals dedicated to deities like Jupiter, Mars, Venus, and Minerva. The influence of Greek mythology was strong, as Roman gods were often adapted from Greek counterparts. Religious observance was not just spiritual, but political, as the state and religion were deeply intertwined. Priests, augurs, and the Vestal Virgins maintained sacred traditions, while emperors later promoted the idea of divine favor in their rule. This religious system provided unity across the empire, but it also evolved, eventually making way for Christianity, which transformed Roman spiritual life in later centuries. Roman architecture and engineering became one of the most recognizable aspects of its culture. The Romans built not only for utility, but also for grandeur, leaving behind monuments that still stand today. The Colosseum in Rome symbolized both entertainment and imperial power, hosting gladiator games and public spectacles. Aqueducts carried water across vast distances, supplying cities with fresh water and enabling urban growth. Roads, bridges, and forums reflected Rome's practicality and commitment to connecting its empire. Public baths, theaters, and amphitheaters showcased the Roman dedication to communal life and leisure. Their mastery of concrete and arches allowed them to construct structures of massive scale and durability. Inspiring architecture for centuries to come, literature and philosophy also flourished in Roman society. Influenced heavily by Greek thought, Roman writers produced works that reflected their own values and experiences. Poets like Virgil, Horace, and Ovid celebrated Rome's greatness, love, and human nature, while historians such as Livy and Tacitus recorded Rome's past with both pride and criticism. Cicero's speeches and writings shaped ideas of rhetoric and politics, while philosophers like Seneca and Marcus Aurelius explored Stoicism, emphasizing duty, discipline, and self-control. Education was highly valued among the elite. Schools taught not only reading and writing, but also oratory, history, and philosophy. Preparing young men for public life, entertainment, and leisure were essential parts of Roman culture. Gladiator games, chariot races at the Circus Maximus, and theatrical performances drew enormous crowds, offering both excitement and a sense of community. These events were often sponsored by politicians or emperors to gain public favor, showing how entertainment was tied to politics. Banquets, feasts, and festivals brought families and communities together, with food and wine playing central roles. In Roman hospitality, even the poorer citizens participated in public celebrations. Reinforcing a shared identity within the empire, Roman law was another pillar of society and culture, one of the most enduring legacies of the empire. The legal system developed over centuries, beginning with the 12 Tables in the Republic and later expanding into a comprehensive body of law that influenced governance across Europe and beyond. Concepts such as contracts, property rights, and legal equality for citizens became central to Roman justice. The idea that law should be written and accessible to all citizens helped ensure stability, and Roman legal principles were later adopted into the codes of many modern nations. Daily life in Rome varied greatly depending on status and wealth. The wealthy lived in luxurious houses, known as villas, with elaborate mosaics, courtyards, and private baths. The poor often crowded into apartment-style buildings called insulae, which were less stable and prone to fires. Markets, forums, and baths were social centers where people gathered not just for commerce, but for news, politics, and conversation. Roman clothing, such as the toga for citizens and stola for women, became symbols of identity, while cuisine included bread, olives, wine, and for the wealthy, exotic dishes from across the empire. The culture and society of Rome were dynamic, constantly evolving as the empire grew. With every conquest, Rome absorbed new ideas, art, and customs, blending them into its own traditions. This cultural adaptability allowed Rome to unify diverse peoples under a single identity, while still respecting local practices. The result was a society that valued order, tradition, and innovation, and a culture that radiated outward, leaving an imprint on art, law, language, and daily life across the ancient world and beyond. The governance of Rome and the role of its emperors defined the empire's political life for centuries, creating a system that combined elements of tradition, innovation, and absolute authority. What began as a republic governed by elected officials and senatorial debate eventually transformed into a vast imperial structure ruled by a single man whose power was reinforced by both political control and military loyalty. This transformation was neither sudden nor without conflict, but it became one of the most influential political systems in history, shaping not only Rome itself but also inspiring models of governance in later civilizations. In the days of the Roman Republic, power was divided among magistrates, the Senate, and popular assemblies. Two consuls, elected annually, shared executive power. While the Senate provided guidance and continuity, composed of Rome's elite families, this republican system balanced authority between the aristocracy and the people, though the patricians often dominated decision-making. Over time, however, political struggles, social unrest, and military expansion weakened the delicate balance of power. Ambitious generals such as Marius Sulla and Julius Caesar used their armies and popularity to challenge senatorial authority, demonstrating that real power often lay in the hands of those who commanded military loyalty rather than in constitutional traditions. The assassination of Julius Caesar in 44 BC marked the climax of this struggle between republican ideals and personal rule. His death plunged Rome into civil war, and out of this turmoil emerged Octavian, later known as Augustus, who established the foundations of the Roman Empire in 27 BC. Augustus carefully presented himself not as a king, but as the princeps, or first citizen, preserving the appearance of republican institutions while concentrating power in his own hands. He reformed taxation, established a permanent army and navy, created the Praetorian Guard to protect the emperor, and reorganized provinces for more efficient governance. His reign brought stability after decades of chaos, earning him the loyalty of the people and securing the legitimacy of imperial rule. The emperors who followed Augustus continued to expand and refine the structure of imperial governance. Power was centralized in the emperor, who controlled the military, the treasury, the courts, and foreign policy. The Senate remained, but its authority was largely symbolic, serving as a body of prestige rather than independent power. Relied on a growing bureaucracy of administrators, many of whom were freedmen or equestrians, to manage the vast empire. Provincial governors were appointed to oversee territories, collect taxes, enforce laws, and maintain order, ensuring that imperial authority reached every corner of the empire. The personalities of individual emperors had a profound impact on Rome's governance. Some, like Augustus, Trajan, and Marcus Aurelius, ruled with wisdom and a sense of responsibility, strengthening the empire and earning the respect of history. Trajan, for instance, expanded the empire to its greatest territorial extent, while Marcus Aurelius embodied the ideals of a philosopher king, ruling with stoic discipline during times of crisis. Others, however, such as Caligula, Nero, and Commodus, became infamous for cruelty, extravagance, or incompetence, leading to instability and rebellion. The succession of emperors was often a source of tension, as the empire lacked a clear system of hereditary rule. Some emperors were chosen by adoption, others by military support, and still others seized power through civil war. This uncertainty frequently destabilized Rome, showing both the strength and the fragility of a system built around a single ruler. Despite these challenges, the system of governance developed by Rome allowed it to manage an empire that stretched from Britain to Mesopotamia, from the Rhine and Danube rivers to the deserts of North Africa. Rome's governors and administrators collected taxes, built infrastructure, enforced Roman law, and spread Roman culture. The empire created a unified economic system with standardized currency and trade networks that facilitated commerce across vast distances. Cities throughout the empire were modeled on Rome itself, with forums, temples, amphitheaters, and baths reflecting both local traditions and Roman identity. This unity helped maintain order and loyalty even among diverse peoples. With their own languages and customs, the role of the emperor was not limited to politics and administration. It was also deeply symbolic. Emperors were portrayed as protectors of the people, guardians of peace, and chosen favorites of the gods. Statues, coins, and monuments carried their images throughout the empire, reinforcing their presence in the daily lives of citizens. Public works, such as roads, aqueducts, and arenas, were often built in the name of the emperor, linking his rule to prosperity and stability. Some emperors, particularly in the eastern provinces, were even worshipped as divine figures, blurring the line between political authority and religious devotion. The imperial cult, in which subjects offered loyalty and sacrifice to the emperor's spirit, became a unifying force that reinforced the emperor's role as the embodiment of Rome itself. At the same time, governance under the emperors had to balance the interests of Rome's elite with the needs of its vast population. Bread and circuses, the policy of providing free grain and public entertainment, ensured that the urban masses of Rome remained content. The emperors understood that political stability depended not only on military power and administrative efficiency, but also on maintaining popular support. By sponsoring games, festivals, and grand spectacles, emperors reinforced their image as generous leaders while distracting the people from political tensions and economic challenges. The Roman system of governance under the emperors was therefore both practical and theatrical. It combined efficient administration, military power, and cultural integration with the projection of authority and the performance of leadership. Each emperor, whether wise or corrupt, shaped this system in his own way, leaving marks on the empire's history that ranged from glory to disaster. Yet the continuity of Roman governance, its ability to adapt and endure across centuries, allowed the empire to sustain its rule over vast and diverse territories longer than almost any other civilization of the ancient world. The decline of the Roman Empire is one of the most studied and debated events in history, for it was not the fall of a single city or the defeat in a single battle, but a gradual unraveling of political, military, and economic structures that had sustained the empire for centuries. Historians often point to the year 476 AD, when the last Western Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by the Germanic chieftain Odoacer as the symbolic end of the Western Empire. But the reality of decline stretched over several centuries, shaped by both internal weaknesses and external pressures. At the same time, the legacy of Rome was so enduring that even after its political collapse, its culture, language, laws, and traditions continued to shape the world in profound ways. The seeds of Rome's decline were planted during the 3rd century, a period of crisis when the empire faced near-constant invasions, economic troubles, and civil wars. The Roman army, once the disciplined backbone of the empire, became increasingly strained as it fought along the vast frontiers against Germanic tribes in the north and Persian forces in the east. The need for constant defense required enormous resources, draining the imperial treasury and putting pressure on taxation. At the same time, loyalty within the army began to shift. Soldiers were often more loyal to their generals than to the emperor, leading to frequent rebellions and the rise of short-lived rulers supported by military factions. This instability weakened the central authority and eroded the unity that had once defined the empire. Economic troubles compounded the decline. Rome's vast empire had thrived on conquest and expansion, bringing in slaves, wealth, and resources from new territories. But as expansion slowed, the empire had to rely more heavily on taxation of its provinces, which placed a crushing burden on farmers and small landowners. Inflation weakened the currency, trade routes became less secure, and the division between the wealthy elite and the struggling poor grew wider. Cities began to decline, and many citizens retreated to rural estates, creating a more feudal-like structure that contrasted sharply with the bustling urban centers of Rome's golden age. Another challenge came from the sheer size of the empire. Governing territories that stretched from Britain to Mesopotamia and from the Danube to North Africa was a monumental task. Communication was slow, local revolts were difficult to suppress quickly, and regional governors often acted with considerable independence. To address these problems, Emperor Diocletian, in the late 3rd century, divided the empire into an eastern and western half, each with its own ruler, creating what became known as the Tetrarchy. While this temporarily stabilized the empire, it also created rivalries and reinforced the division between East and West, a divide that would ultimately shape the empire's fate. Religion also played a transformative role in this period. The spread of Christianity, once persecuted within the empire, gained momentum and eventually became the dominant faith. In the early 4th century, Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity with the Edict of Milan, and by the end of the century, it had become the official religion of the empire. This shift in religious culture changed Roman identity, reducing the role of traditional pagan rituals and temples that had long been intertwined with politics and governance. While Christianity provided a new spiritual unity, it also created divisions between those who embraced the new faith and those who clung to older traditions. The Western Roman Empire faced increasing pressure from outside forces during the 4th and 5th centuries. Germanic tribes such as the Visigoths, Vandals, and Ostrogoths pushed into Roman territory, fleeing the advance of the Huns from the east. In 410 AD, the Visigoths under Alaric famously sacked Rome, shocking the empire and symbolizing its vulnerability. Later, in 455 AD, the Vandals carried out another sack of the city. The Roman military stretched thin and reliant increasingly on mercenary forces of non-Roman origin, struggled to defend its borders. These pressures culminated in 476 AD, when the Western Empire effectively ceased to exist as a political entity, replaced by a patchwork of Germanic kingdoms. While the Western Empire collapsed, the Eastern Roman Empire, known as the Byzantine Empire, continued to thrive with its capital at Constantinople. For nearly 1,000 years after the fall of the West, Byzantium preserved Roman laws, administration, and culture, serving as a bridge between the ancient and medieval worlds. The Byzantine emperors saw themselves as Roman emperors, and their influence extended far beyond their borders, particularly in spreading Christianity and maintaining classical knowledge. The legacy of Rome, however, is perhaps even more significant than its decline. Roman law laid the foundation for legal systems in Europe, with principles such as equality before the law, contracts, and property rights influencing modern legal traditions. Latin, the language of Rome, evolved into the Romance languages Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Romanian, and also contributed heavily to English vocabulary. Roman architecture and engineering, with innovations such as the arch, the dome, and concrete, inspired building styles for centuries, visible in medieval cathedrals, Renaissance palaces, and even modern government buildings. The cultural influence of Rome was equally enduring. The works of Roman poets, historians, and philosophers were preserved and studied throughout the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, shaping Western literature and thought. The Roman model of governance, with its blend of republican ideals and imperial authority, influenced political thinkers and institutions long after the empire's fall. Even the concept of Rome itself continued to inspire new powers, from the Holy Roman Empire in medieval Europe to the Russian czars who saw Moscow as the Third Rome. Although Rome's political structure eventually collapsed under the weight of internal problems and external invasions, its legacy proved far more durable than its empire. Rome's imprint on law, language, architecture, religion, and governance ensured that its influence would continue to shape the course of human history, leaving a heritage that outlived the empire itself and continues to resonate in the modern world.